You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in Northport, Florida. A couple of really cool things that I want to bring up. First, I've got a show called uh, the Bobcat Blitz. Aired last Tuesday for the very first time, and I want to make sure that everybody is well aware of what's going on. We're talking to coaches and student athletes about their accomplishments and trying to give them some notoriety here in our own town. So that show airs on Tuesdays from 6 to 7. We went over last week until about 7:30. You can catch us live on Facebook and you can check us out. We try to do a bang up job. Let the coaches really take the reins and give their insight of what's going on, and then the student athletes. We also try to get a commissioner. Last week we had the mayor on. Miss Barbara Langdon joined us, which was really nice. This is an opportunity to show your support. We had over 1,000 viewings of that video. We were over 400 within the first 48 hours, which was in just a crazy thing because we didn't put it out there for anybody. But we are out there. We're doing posters now. We've got graphic arts department at the high school getting involved. And we met with that student body this morning. And we're trying to create a great image for the town and the city of Northport and athletics. So join us on Tuesdays. If you want to come out and join it live, we're at Beef O'Brady's at 6 to 7 o'clock live on the air. So I wanted to throw that out there. The second thing is it is 9/11, and I wanted to take just a real quick moment. One, to thank all first responders, anyone who lost family members. It is agonizing enough when we lose people naturally. But when it happens like that, it's just one very sad moment. So I'd like to take about 15 seconds here and just have a moment of silence, which doesn't happen too often on the air anymore. But let's take about 15 seconds. Thank you. And just pray for everyone. Thank you very much. I really appreciated that. I hope that anybody out there that has loved ones that are were taken in that day know that we all appreciate and care about you, and hopefully everyone is doing fine. So, moving on, we've got a very special guest. Joan, you want to introduce yourself here real quick?
Hi. Thank you for having me, John. I really appreciate coming on. It seems like we're doing this once a month now,
Yes.
and I'm your spokesperson or guest. I'm Joan Derrig-Heacox, doctorate in practical theology. So I study belief systems, and particularly as it relates to domestic violence. I am the sexual assault victims advocate and volunteer coordinator for C.A.R.E, Center for Abuse and Rape Emergency, which supports and cares for victims that live in Charlotte County. We have C.A.R.E, which helps the Northport area, and ACT that does Lee County. So C.A.R.E does domestic violence, sexual assault services in Sarasota and what is it, DeSoto County that you're in?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. But
Can
I'm
you?
with CARE.
We really haven't talked about that in depth as far as the other organizations, but can you talk about the importance of the partnership that you all have together?
Well, CARE is because Charlotte County is a little bit smaller county. We are a little bit of a little smaller facility, but we offer the same services. So each county, so in Florida, there are 42 or 41 domestic violence centers, certified centers. So we have to be certified, and there are 32 rape counseling centers, certified rape center care centers. And so we're mandated. We are overseen by DCF, Department of Children and Family Services. So we provide lots of services for survivors of domestic violence and their family and friends. Because when this happens, either sexual assault or domestic violence, it's not just one person that's affected, it's the entire family. It's the entire loss. Children see domestic violence every day. Some of the services we offer, number one, we are a 24/7 call. So no matter what time of day it is, holidays, every day, weekends, we take the calls and we will help you. We do like a phone call, crisis call, or if you just want to talk about it, I think this is going on. Is this domestic violence? We do one-on-one counseling. We have shelters. Those are sort of if there's a last chance of where can I go. We have counseling services both on the phone and in person. We have economic justice, and we help find housing for domestic violence and help. A lot of times they've been isolated. They don't have a bank account. They don't have. We're going to go into this more. So economic justice and court advocates. We have child protection investigator. We have law. We work with law enforcement.
Yep.
All of us do more or less the same things. And it's all based on the county, but we collaborate, we help each other. We do a lot of training. So being a volunteer for me, because I'm a volunteer coordinator, my volunteers are always going through training so we can better serve our clients. So,
and we've got a very special month coming up
yes.
For you guys, and it means a lot to you. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And in the United States, the color is purple. Thank you very much. Worldwide, it's orange. So that's sort of interesting.
Sorry.
And so this is when we become aware, and we like to talk even more about what's going on. So in the time frame that you and I are going to talk, 60 minutes, in the next 60 minutes, 1,200 people will be experience domestic violence. So 20 people per minute experience domestic violence. And if you add that up in the United States, that's 10 million people. So every minute, 20 people are experiencing domestic violence. So this is not a small problem. It's just not one that we talk about. And it's not one that we often recognize.
Well, it's one that we don't talk about, but we do once a month. We end up talking about it, or very close to it. And the reason we do it is that we're trying to break down that barrier that's kind of set forth, because it's been decades of pushing it down, so to speak. And that might actually be a great poster. You've been pushing me down, domestic violence, and the domestic violence is down. Well, that is domestic violence. You just push somebody down, you just keep them down. The whole thing is when we're not talking about it, we can't resolve issues.
No.
And it's kind of like everything in this world right now. If we're not willing to open our mouths and our ears and our hearts and our minds, there's not a whole lot we can accomplish. But as true-blooded Americans, I think we could knock this thing out of the park and be better citizens if we were paying attention to our surroundings.
Yes. So how do we overcome this? Instead of blaming the woman or man that is experiencing domestic violence, we have to look at our culture. We have to look at what's going on that perpetuates it. So, for example, we have to talk about gender equality, because domestic violence, as is rape, has nothing to do with love. It is not love. It is about power and control. So we have to stop abuse in childhood and children witnessing abuse, because usually it comes out of a situation where someone has been abused either physically, sexually, or emotionally in childhood. And then because they grow up with that, that becomes normal. Doesn't everybody get beaten? Doesn't everybody get put down? Isn't everybody limited financially or threatened or isolated? Isn't that the norm? So when we think that that's the norm, we don't, there's no reason to change it because it's normalized. And when a child grows up and becomes an adult, it's likely that they
I
will
may have
become
lost
an
you.
abuser.
Just
Yes.
Yep, we're back. Had
Thank
a
you.
freeze there.
Awesome. So that's the Gender Equality Index. We must make sure that women have the rights to say yes and no, the right to jobs. They have to be able to speak for themselves. We have used protection as one of our methods for inequality. So we have said, well, women need to be protected. So therefore, men have to have provide that protection. Well, that protection ends up being isolation. Oh, it's too hard out there to work in the public, so you can work in the home and you'll be safe. It's too hard out there for you to earn money, so I'll take care of you. Or you have children, you stay home and take care of the children, and you don't earn money, and there isn't a, then once you don't have any money, then there's no way for you to escape or get away from it. So we have to have equal rights for healthcare.
Yep.
Women need to be able to choose how they want their bodies, the type of care they want for their bodies. We don't want to make the issue about something else. Women have often been subjugated to the rights of others over themselves. They need the right to work and work in jobs that pay fairly so they also can get housing and buy what they need. So often, well, you don't need that. You don't need a big paycheck because you're already married. And so your husband makes more money. So you don't need to make so much money. But in fact, that is perpetuating domestic violence. That's financial abuse against women when you use that argument to deny fair pay. Knowledge and education, women need to have opportunities to know about their bodies, know about their rights, and know about, have knowledge so they can be educated and work in fields or jobs where they can earn a higher level of income. Those are
Well,
just some of the equity issues.
we're we both worked in an industry that doesn't have the I want to say this in the medical industry, you have it's just there's good rates of pay, and we talked about rates of pay. But I want to talk about the social worker side of things because there's a huge problem that we have today in the current conversations that we're having with where social workers need to be, where they're going to what they're going to do, how they're going to affect things. And there's a direct connection between the social side and domestic violence and a social worker who's out and about and analyzing these things. And because of my healthcare, I've got about 27 years background in healthcare. I've worked with social workers. I've been alongside of them at dinners and lunches and had conversations. And now this was years ago, but what's really sad is that things don't change within that industry on the dollar amount side. So everybody thinks, oh yeah, I got a 4-year degree in and I'm going to be a great social worker. I'm going to change the world. Well, yeah, but you're going to do it for a whole lot less money than you had planned for. First off, the second side of that is you're going to be involved in a job like yours, and I kind of want to look at the social worker side of it and what the communities and even government is trying to push into the social worker realm. And I don't know that the social worker realm is actually going to expand as far as the dollar amount, but we're going to tack on more responsibility to the social worker than uh, and I got to tell you, you have too many responsibilities now for what little social workers are paid. And I think we have to look at that, and maybe this is like the most important day to even talk about that because of it being 9/11 and and people having to deal with losses and different things like that. A lot of social workers were involved in that. And I'm sitting here maybe rambling a little bit, but can you kind of grasp? I know you know what I'm talking about. I saw you smile. So can you kind of talk about that relationship as a social worker and trying to tie into the domestic side of it, but also the responsibility social workers have to society?
Well, I can try and address the issue, but I'm not a licensed social worker. My training is a little different than that, but not unlike it. So, with the work of social workers, what we are called to do is care for, to care for the needs of others, and to offer protection in some ways. So, as a social worker in a hospital setting, the social worker has to see, are they going home? Do they have a safe place to go home to? But most of what we do is we hear the stories, and we hear the stories of loss. Social workers that work for DCF, and I don't want to speak for them, they
Sure.
have huge cases, a huge number of people, that they're a significant caseload. They cannot, it's very, very difficult for them to stay on top of every single one. So budgets decrease, the case number increases, and the pay doesn't usually follow.
Great.
But they're the ones that are out in the field. I mean, they use their cars often to drive to the house of the client, to check on the children, to check on an elderly person who might be a vulnerable adult. They hear the stories, they see the type of lifestyle, the poverty, they see the struggles of women, and I can say it from the violence. So we have clients that come into our shelter and in for our services. The reason we have economic justice is because many of them have been financially abused. I just worked with a woman today. Her boyfriend, not husband, boyfriend, knows how much money she makes and takes it. So she doesn't get his money, but he gets her money, and he controls her money. She doesn't know how to get a bank account by herself. She doesn't, no one's ever taught her how to manage finances. As a result, she ends up being dependent on him and gives all her money away, gives it to him. So we do economic justice, and a lot of that is what a social worker would be doing, trying to help them find jobs, housing, living circumstances, medical care. That all falls under the realm of social worker. And it's care social services, which are not paid well
Yes.
usually.
Well, and I brought that up because when you tie those two things together, most people say, "Well, I'm doing it for the money." Okay, first off, you're not doing it for the money. Second off, you're doing it for, and this is a tough one to say. Um, the pride of the job. You wish you didn't have that pride of the job or that job, but it is the pride of the job because somebody has to do that work. And unfortunately, we live in a society that it's growing, um, exponentially versus not. And we have a show like this who's talking about it. But if you turn on the radio, very rarely are they even going to mention the words domestic violence unless it's with a known actor or sports figure out there in the world. And they get, their 15 seconds of fame to do that. But uh, preemptively, I we have to, as a nation, start talking about this, don't we?
Yes. So that, going back a little bit to what I said earlier, when domestic violence is normalized, okay? So when gender inequality is normalized, where women are not given the right to finances, to good pay, to legal services, and to laws that protect her specifically, then we end up with a society that continues to perpetuate domestic violence and financial abuse of women. So that's where that gender equality. So here's an interesting thing: people that normalize domestic violence end up causing it to be perpetuated. When most social workers, and I'm going to speak part of why I went into the field that I went into, which is similar to social work, is because there's a great article that I read many years ago when I was studying this, is vocation is autobiography. So in other words, we choose a vocation that we understand very well. So I don't want to speak for social workers around the world. I will say that oftentimes people go into a field because they care about other people, because they've experienced some form of maybe sexual assault or domestic violence, or they witness their parents fighting and they want to change the world. They want to change the world, not perpetuate it. So that's the great gift of social workers, because they don't want this to happen to somebody else. So abusers say this happened to me and they minimalize it and become abusers. But people that have had it, which is the majority of the people, want to change the system and change the world for the better, because they don't want somebody else to experience the abuse that they experienced, whether it's sexual assault or domestic violence, or watching it from in your childhood.
So I want to talk a little bit because we're in the first. Oh gosh, we've kind of blown through 20 something minutes already. But the can you talk about the resources real quick for this first half hour, on how people could get a hold of you, learn more, check out your website, and so forth.
So for CARE, Center for Abuse and Rape Emergencies, you go to carefl for Florida .com, .org, and you can check out our website. You can call us. Our main office phone number is 941-639-5499. We've got the numbers up on that are on the screen. But for
Scrolling.
the radio, the Inglewood number is 941-475-6465. Really important number for everyone to have in their phone is, put this in your contact information under hotline, 941-627-6000. I'm going to say it again. Everybody put this in your phone, 941-627-6000. So if you meet somebody and you think they're being exposed to domestic violence or experiencing that, share the number and get them to call. Or you can call us and we will talk to you about it. We have
And
a helpline, which is for sexual assaults. I just worked with several rape victims over the last couple of days that we are getting them to report. Well, we aren't getting them to report. We're supporting them as they're reporting. Again, rape has nothing to do with sex or love. It's all about power, domestic violence, power and control. So the helpline for sexual assault is 941-637-0404. And our younger generation loves to text, and we are getting texts. You can text us, 941-499-8534. So you can text us for help anytime. Again, all these numbers are answered 24/7, 365 days a week.
so I know that we've hit this before, and I've kind of pulled up some questions.
Okay.
Although I got to tell you, we've been doing this for 4 years. We're really good at this because we've nailed these questions over and over again. And really, we want to encourage people to share this information. The more it gets shared on Facebook, the more exposure CARE gets, the more domestic violence gets exposed, and it's the quiet that we're trying to get. because they're quiet. They're not going to be boisterous. They're going to be very quiet about what they're doing and what's happening to them. And you never know what they click on Facebook to get this information, and they may make those phone calls. We've actually had that happen when people have watched this show, and now we're actually taking the radio show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and we are really getting some information out there. Laura, thank you so much for participating, Laura. Laura says awareness is the key. Thank you for getting this information out.
Thank you.
Fantastic. The more that we get it out, the better. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, as far as what the abused is going through, and why it's important to even be subtle about your approach?
So, again, remembering that domestic abuse is about power and control, it is not about love. So it's so difficult to have someone understand. The woman, usually it's a woman. So 1 out of 3 women experience domestic violence in their lifetime. So usually it's a woman, it's 1 out of 7. But men do it, men experience it as well. Uh, I had I had a man tell me that his wife used to hit him over the head with a frying pan. I'm not kidding. And it was so hard for him to talk about it. But so for women, they are usually less physically able to defend themselves. And when they do defend themselves, it results with even more abuse. So approaching someone who you think is experiencing domestic violence is very frightening for that person. So we always have to approach and keep them safe. So I tell people, put the word care into their phone with our helpline and hotline phone number. Sorry, this does this all the time. I'll try and keep talking here. And when you talk, I'll get up.
Yeah, there
So,
you go.
uh, so they are often isolated.
Yep.
Okay. So they're kept isolated. Every dollar they spend is often tracked. So if they go to the store, they have to show a receipt. So financially, they don't have money. They've been given a certain allowance and able to go out. But a lot of times it's isolation and gaslighting and demeaning behavior, told that they're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, you're too immature, you're a terrible mother, you're a terrible wife. I remember hearing often when a woman would say, I'm experiencing something, like, they would be talking about the situation, and the friends and family would say, oh, it's not that bad, or he was just having a really bad day, or most of the time he's really nice, or look what a beautiful house you live in and you have everything, you have jewelry, you have clothes, you have a car, but and so it can't be that bad. I hear that a lot as a response. Well, it can't be that bad. Well, it is that bad. It's actually a lot worse than what I'm telling you. This is a minor thing that I'm telling you. You have the worst parts, right? So
Yep.
when somebody approaches you, when you approach them, be very careful, because you don't know who's listening. You don't know if the partner looks at their phone, so they don't even have privacy in their own phone. They have no boundaries. Um, what is this about? Damsel in distress?
Damsel in distress. That's Laura's been watching, and she's been on the show before, so she provides a lot of security type stuff to
Okay,
C.A.R.E.
great.
So I just thought I'd give her a little bit of props, because
Awesome.
she does a great job. She's
Self-defense
in the,
classes are really important.
they are, and it's perfect for. And I may have spelled it wrong. I did I spell it wrong?
Well,
No,
while
there we
you're
go.
fixing
Yeah,
that, I'm going to turn the light on. How's
yeah. Go
that?
ahead
So
and
go to
turn it
your
on,
screen. Let me
because
turn my light back
yep.
on.
Go ahead. Go
This
ahead.
is those automatic lights that turn off every, I don't know, whatever they decide.
Well, it's very important. One, to be aware of your surroundings, but two, it is also very important to have yourself set up for success. So if you are going to have to defend yourself, you might as well know what you're doing, with any type of, um, and I don't want to call it a weapon because it's more defense than anything, but even using pepper spray, if you don't know how to use pepper spray, uh, you can spray yourself sometimes. So it's very important, I think, to get the right people around you, uh, and really kind of keep that in a positive way. It's it and as she's saying, having layered protection. Uh, layered protection is one thing, but just just the knowledge. I want you to talk a little bit about how people that are in that abused scenario, a lot of times they're not able to get information in big chunks. It's small tidbits, isn't it?
Correct. And I put it this way, on average, it takes 9 times for a woman to leave. 9 attempts at leaving.
That's
So
crazy.
safety planning is different than an exit plan. An exit plan is when they're going to leave because that's when the highest chances or the highest risk of them being sexually assaulted. I'm sorry, being can be sexually assaulted or being physically harmed, even murdered. So is within when they are trying to escape or shortly thereafter, within even a couple of months afterwards. Um, so
You
safety planning and planning what one's going to do is a big part of what we help people do, is take the steps to get out and recognize it and be able to work out their way out. I took Tai Chi, by the way. I studied Tai Chi. I started
Very
with
cool.
qigong and worked into tai chi for my own self defense, and I also live alone, so I have wasp spray because wasp spray will shoot about 25 to 30 feet, where pepper spray or even mace will only shoot a short distance. So before they attack, or if they're breaking in or coming after you, having some wasp spray to keep those bad wasps away
Yep.
is very handy.
Well, it's I hate to say this, but you would never know this information off of uh, just the common everyday show out there in this world. Uh,
Yes.
we've got we've got two of you together now that I don't think, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that Laura's been down to C.A.R.E to talk to you guys at all, but what's really cool about that is there's a bond now between damsel in distress or defense and distress at the same time, because you do have people in distress, and it's one of those things where this relationship that you guys are forming even on the air, that's the same thing that occurs a lot of times with people who are involved in domestic violence, is they kind of catch these seconds or minutes that they have of information to kind of change and redirect themselves. uh, can you talk uh, can you talk a little bit about that, and if you have a friend in that scenario, how you should not really just kind of, and I'm going to use this word, bulldoze them over. They're getting bulldozed over anyway. So if you bulldoze somebody who's already in that spot, they may run back to the person who they feel most comfortable with.
Right. Well, you're comfortable. Again, that's often the reason people end up in a domestic violence situation, is because 90% of I just saw a statistic I wanted to share with you. And I lost it here a second ago. Um, 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to the violence. So they're eyewitnesses to violence. And so that they grow into it and they don't know that there's a different way to behave. So they're accustomed to violent behavior. So oftentimes working with somebody, and there's no boundaries, and somebody's always got power over them, so it's very competitive, like power is competitive. So trying to work with somebody to empower them in a way that is a healthy way is, and talking to them without pointing victim blaming. And most of the time, why didn't they leave? Or why are they still there? That doesn't get the victim of domestic violence out of the house. It just creates more anxiety and stress. So what is possible? Like, first it begins the conversation and the awareness. um, I've advised all young girls, particularly young girls, because we're seeing so much dating violence out there. The amount of, I mean, girls are being abused by their dating relationships. They're not even married, and they're in high school and middle school, and it's showing up. So get your kids involved in, ask C.A.R.E to come. We will come and talk to your children's programming. Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and the high school. You're doing all this stuff with the Bobcats. Let's get somebody in to talk to the Bobcats about what dating looks like, how to date properly, dating relationships, healthy relationships, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Um, and a lot of this, it's, again, pornography is a big part of this as well, because it's so readily available on the internet. And we're seeing violence in pornography, and they can access it from the internet. We're seeing violence in pornography and in television and in programming, lots of programming where the woman is being assaulted or people are being assaulted, and assaulting becomes normalized, and it can't be that bad. That's not exactly what you asked. I kind of forgot what you asked me.
That's all right, because
I
you're on a tangent, and I kind of like it. But
Oh, okay.
it's a good one. It's a good one because you brought in teenagers and
Yes.
dating, and I want to know, is there, and I feel like there is, because I I'm a younger, older generation, much younger, older generation. I have to say that now. Now that I
Right.
hit 60, holy crap. I used to say that when I was 35 and it didn't mean so much, but now I say it and I got to emphasize something else. But you've got you've got to take a look at how lifestyle has changed. We've talked about the dismantling of, as a nation, we're hearing it now, the dismantling of the family unit, and it has been kind of dismantled through the decades, and there's a lot of, I think, a lot of good things that would have come from that. But I think a lot of tragic things have happened because of, um, I think, really lack of leadership in that regard. But then I go back and I look at the video games, and Pac-Man. Pac-Man was our, we're eating the dots. Now they're eating people on and killing people and running people over and doing things in a video game, where they've got five screens in front of them at home, and they never leave. And I'm wondering, is there a correlation between some of the activities that we've taken, I guess, to another level as far as society goes? Because there has to be some level of just the sheer fact that video games and time on screen. I never heard of that before I, had kids. Screen time. How many screen time you have? Well, now we're talking about, 8 to 10 hours of screen time and 3 hours of sleep, and then they go to school. I wonder why they're beating people up. They're not sleeping. They're seeing violence. Is there some kind of correlation between all that?
Well, I'm sure that there is. I don't have any statistics on that. There have
That might be something that might not fun to look up, but I mean
That'd be
terrorizing.
interesting. There's an excellent book. It's an old book. It's called Recovering from Rape. And it's an excellent book by Dr. Linda Ledray. And this is an old book that I happen to have, but she talks about some of the correlation between pornography and violence on TV, and how many programs do you watch that the whole basis of the program is that a woman is killed or she's raped. Like the whole program is about women being killed and raped. And then the detective trying to discover why or who. And so what we had before was television and movies. And what we thought was macho, and I'm going to go back to this a little bit. What does it mean to be a man? That's a really interesting question when we're looking at domestic violence, and it's about power and control. If men feel powerless, or or that their idea of what it means to be macho is to be powerful physically, financially, but and it's showing up. Is that how it's showing up for young men to feel powerful? Is by playing these video games where, and I don't play video games, but I have kids that do. I have a son that does. I just recently talked to a young man, and he was saying, that the video playing is interfering with his marriage because he's playing video games instead of engaging in conversation with his wife. And when you play a video game and you shoot somebody, it's a TV. The person then dies and then they get right back up again and they go on. And that doesn't happen in real life. If you shoot somebody in real life and you hit them, they're done. They got to go to the hospital. They don't pop right back up like on a video game in the same way. So I don't know what the direct correlation is, and no one's ever been able to, that I know, has made that. We've tried to make that argument, but who's doing how do you do that research, right, to prove that point?
We don't even want to do that research.
We talked about this is the more violence you see, the more aggressive you become. And interestingly enough, aggression and violence is also connected to sexual arousal. So something that was done was, remember all those horror shows where the girl goes down into the basement and she gets murdered? There was a whole series of shows that came out in like the 70s, the 80s and 90s, where young boys, right, and girls would they would see the girl half naked, right, and become sexually aroused, and then they would murder her. Somebody would murder her. So they connected with young boys, or this younger generation in television programming, sexual arousal and and then physical assault. So that's an interesting correlation. So they would become sexually aroused, and then they would witness a violent act against a female on a screen on TV. So there's some correlation that's related to that type of programming. That was, I don't have the exact numbers on that.
That's all right, because I want to stay right here for another couple of minutes, because I think I think if you start talking about this to the right age group, there's some truth in turn, that things do change, and the youth is, the informing to the youth, to them, is a big deal. And if you were a parent today, how would you approach domestic violence awareness month with your 10-year-old? What would you suggest?
Wow. So we do programming. We have prevention programmings that address that very issue, not specifically domestic violence, because we don't necessarily use that. But what happens when you start to see violence in your family, or you see a friend that's hurt? Oops, there's some sort of Amber Alert that just went off. So
Palm Beach County.
Oh, there's the other one, Palm Beach County. Yep, I just got it on the other phone. I got lots of phones here.
Yep.
So beginning to understand about being able to recognize what domestic violence looks like, violence against another person. So it begins by women saying, I am valuable and I can be safe. I don't need, and you were talking about the dissolution of families. Well, up until the 1980s and 90s, it was considered, it was legal to rape your wife. It was legal to beat your wife. It's illegal to beat your friend, but you can beat your wife because she was considered an object or a piece of property. So that's about the gender equality. So gender equality begins that conversation of girls are valuable and they are equal. They're not the same. We're not biologically gender the same, but we are valuable and that we can keep ourselves safe, just like damsels in defense. And Tai Chi, teaching them how to have awareness rather than saying you can't go unless you have a boy go with you, which is the way I was raised. You can go, but you have to have a man with you. Well, who knew that that man or boy was going to be the one that assaulted me? So we forget. And again, I just had this conversation with a young woman today. Some man was very nice, and I see this all the time where rape happens. A guy will be really nice and he will offer to give her a ride, or I will keep you safe, and then rapes her. And the girl raised in the, happily ever after Cinderella story, Beauty and the Beast, the man is going to become nice and become her caregiver and take care of her. So we have to teach girls to be able to recognize, take care of themselves, to be safe, to be financially responsible, understand money, and to have good emotional resiliency and understand that life isn't always easy, but you can get through it. So having emotional resiliency and resiliency to get through difficult times. Like it's not all easy.
It
So
is
many
not.
kids were told, life is supposed to be easy. Well, it's not. And part of the great part of life is when it's not so easy, you become very creative and what else is possible.
You know, I want to talk. I'm staying within this youth thing because I think that when you start talking to adults, adults already have either their vision already set or you're not penetrating through. Uh, with the kids, I mean, there's a couple things that kids are going through right now, which is, uh, and we had some major changes on a social side with the minimum wage going up to $15 an hour. Which, if you'd have told me that when I was a kid, I'd have laughed at you because our 40-cent increase every third year for minimum wage was what we dealt with, but it seems like we took like a $5 to $7 jump, um, and it really, I think it unintentionally added a lot of stress to people who thought it, and people meaning, I hate to say this, but the senior working class and the young working class all clashing together over the same jobs at the Wendy's and Taco Bells and the Walmarts of the world. But I think what they forgot to include into that whole thing was the stressors that come with that, because they were promised more money and they're actually making less money today than they were before, because capitalism dictates a lot of things. You have more money in your wallet. Capitalism is how much more can we take from them, and that's a stressor. And you have to play them all out, because just because you feel like I'm going to make $15 an hour finally. No, the truth of the matter is that same $8 an hour job could have been an $8 an hour job, and you'd have had the same stressors there. You just doubled your money, and you have the same stressors again. Only this time there's nowhere out. They just can't keep raising the minimum wage. I look at all those things in totality, and I want to go back to something you said earlier, was to look for ways to educate yourself to make more money, take that stressor out, pay attention to your goal, plan your way through life, And I think that's huge. Now, social workers, and we talked about that. Social workers and healthcare workers, they do it for a completely different reason. All right, a completely different reason. As much as baseball players love baseball, they're not social workers, and they need help. And they do have social workers that are helping them adjust to everything. But I kind of want to talk and let you run with this for a few minutes about the stressors that come from really the blue collar side of things. And I'm not saying that the upper echelon doesn't have the problem. They just have lots more money to mask it over. But the blue collar stressors that are out there today.
Okay, so I'm going to address this in three different ways. Number one,
Okay.
domestic violence crosses all social, economic, and racial and gender and whatever. It crosses all boundaries, there's no anyone that's excluded. Okay. So domestic violence is really, it's everywhere. The person that's living in a big, huge house can be very severely abused as much as someone that is in a lower economic situation. Abuse is abuse, right? So I just want to make that point really clear, because the stress of making a lot of money, even though it doesn't seem like it to somebody that might be a blue collar worker, is extremely stressful. Trying to keep a multi-billion-dollar company afloat is a very stressful job. And that stress can show up on the wife, children, and family and employees all around them. So abuse shows up all over the place. Now, to address but for me, money is a big deal. So my dad was a CPA. Thank you, Dad, for telling me how to manage my money when I was young. Every girl, every boy needs to take a class on finances, how to do a bank loan, what it means to have a credit card, and what it means to have money in the bank, how to save money, how to do a 401k for your future when you think you don't have enough money. So I'm going to use myself just as a funny little example. I wanted to buy a sailboat and I wanted to live on a sailboat. So I'm choosing to live a very minimalistic life. But what happened was, long before I bought my sailboat, I started asking myself the question, will this fit on my sailboat? And the answer was no. I could have about 5 pairs of shoes, maybe 10 if they're flip-flops, because they would fit. But clothing, nope. Knickknacks, nope. Jewelry, nope. Extra furniture, nope. Extra food, nope. So that meant no to spending a lot of money. And that taught me how to really save money and to say no, because yes, we live in a very capitalistic world. And yes, marketing is amazing. They can market that money right out of your pocket in no time at all by humiliating you into thinking you have to have this outfit instead of your old outfit. You got to get a new outfit, right? So learning how to say no to our major marketing people that are amazing at it, that are getting that money right out of your hand. I studied marketing communications, consumer behavior, which is psychology, on how to get people to spend money. So the
Yep.
trick is you have to say no. One small TV, one, not 10 TVs, not the newest car. So you have to think about how to spend your money because we have it. We think we have to have a house that's this big and not okay with a house that's this big, right? We also
Yep.
grew up, many of our younger people grew up in a generation where they thought they had to do better than their parents, and that's not happening. A lot of our younger kids are not making the money and able to buy houses. And I'm not pointing fingers, but there are a lot of houses here, but they're the second or third house of someone else. So somebody else's second or third house, right,
Yep.
is
Go ahead.
making it
You're
very difficult for other people to have a house or
correct.
an apartment.
You know,
So
we
really, I think teaching people about being financially responsible and teaching women. I took my daughter, I don't like talking about myself, but I took my daughter to the bank when she was 14 years old, and she and I went into that bank and we talked about savings accounts, how to take out a loan. She paid back the loan, ended up with uh, great credit rating because we set it all up so she could come out ahead. And by the time she graduated from high school and then did her schooling, she had great credit, bought a house, bought cars, but she probably still has her first dollar. I'm just kidding about that. I love you, Sarah. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, you
I
don't need
do.
all this stuff. And that's a big problem, having the latest technology and spending your money that you don't have. Every bill should be paid at the end of the month. That's my dad said. CPAs pay all the bills at the end of the month. If you don't have money to spend at the end of the month, then you don't buy it. So I think money is key. Money is key for everyone.
Well, I've got, we're 401 now. So we're past our time, but uh give your information again for contacting you in case somebody is out there and wants to share this with somebody who's in need.
Okay, so remember carefl.org, O-R-G. So CAREFL.org. Go to our website. Our hotline number is 941-627-6000. The sexual assault line is 941-637 0404. If you live in Inglewood but are in Charlotte County, 941-475-6465. 65 and texting. Lots of people like to text us 941-499-8534. So please call us, please contact us if you have any questions or concerns, and we can help you change your life and those around you.
I'm glad that you took the approach that you did on those answers. I didn't think my question was geared that way when I said it. I had that thought in my head, but I'm glad you took that because you're 100% right. And their stressors are all the way through. We've got people today that are working at they're working their job. A lot of these owners that are out here right now, uh, of the restaurants, if you haven't been out to dinner and you haven't seen the short-handed uh, restaurant, obviously you haven't gone to dinner lately because they're all short-handed. But when you look at what's happening in the world right now, and it's just not Florida, it's all over. It took up in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. I think it was almost a full year before Eat In McDonald's would open up their Eat In, not because of COVID. They just didn't have enough staff. So you talk about managers who are under the gun, owners who are under the gun, who are covering shifts, who are working double and triple what they normally would work. Not that that's an excuse for it, but we are, as a society, we're kind of setting ourselves up for demise when we're near exhaustion, and we may act out of that versus the normal tendency to be able to control yourself and go sit down for a little bit. But I think there's a lot to be said for the people who are really, and I'm going to use this word, grinding it out every day. And I think that's why we're seeing the rise.
The rise in domestic violence.
Yeah.
Well, this has been going on. It's being reported more. And so domestic violence has been around
Well,
because
no,
we
it
were
has.
property. Women were property. So there was no such thing as domestic violence, right?
Right.
And women that were single they were free game to anyone to assault them. And it was legal,
Right.
right? Because they were property. So we have to get off this idea of women as being property and that we can do whatever we want to do to them because we can. That is the biggest issue when it comes to domestic violence. The domestic violence that you're talking about that's related to stressors is not, people get in fights, right? That's not, and they have disagreements. We're talking about people that are choosing to manipulate and control another person's life. That's a very different conversation than I'm stressed out. So I'm stressed out. I get mad and I yell at my wife, or the wife yells at the husband, or whatever. They get in a yelling fight. And again, that is stress related. But when we assault someone because we're stressed out and feel that we have the right to take our anger and frustration out on another human being because I have that right, that's very different.
I would agree, and I guess my my thought in that whole thing would be, if we're doing it and it's an an action that we're taking, yes, everybody fights. Everybody does that. I'll chalk that one up. That's a given. And I that's not the full totality of what I'm looking at. People are the working class, which I've been pretty much all my life, believe it or not. The working class has an unbelievable amount of pressure on them to step up. And I mean step up not in the I'm going to step up in the world, is that I want to get out of where I'm at. And I think that if you're overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, you're set up for failure in what you're doing mentally. I think that, yes, while I'll agree with you, there are some people out there that realize what they did, I am sorry, and move on. There's a I think a large portion that we don't talk about. And I'll agree with you on the domestic side of it. I have no issue with being a team player on stopping all that. But I think we have to talk about the fact that doing it once is one thing, but that third time that I got
Right.
upset because I was at work and I overworked myself, that's not an excuse anymore. So I
Correct.
have
That's what I'm
that's
saying.
yeah, yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it, was
Yes.
that
So,
you
so
you have to be
yes.
aware that if somebody comes home from work and they did it last week and it's been a month, I, okay, it's that's twice. It doesn't count. It's only a month ago.
Yeah.
You
No,
have to kind of break down that barrier.
it always counts, right? It always counts.
Yeah,
And so the problem is that someone that's very, very stressed out, it can go both ways. If you're super stressed out and blah, 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 it's very easy for an abuser to abuse you. Like if I go to work, I'm stressed out all the time and I come home, I don't have the stamina to defend myself against an abuser, right?
right.
Somebody can very easily abuse someone who is just exactly the way you described it. Or that person that you just described can become the abuser and feel that they are entitled to abuse other people. So it's that entitlement. I can abuse you because I'm entitled to abuse you because you're my wife or you're my child
Sure.
or you're my friend or whoever we make up, or the woman on the street that's on her way home from work. So that's a crime. When you abuse someone, it's a crime, right? It's against the law. The
Now,
fact of the matter is, they do it in their home, and historically, it's not a crime because it's your wife or your kids.
right.
That's the part that has to change. Hurting someone is a crime. whether it's your wife or your neighbor, right? So if you hit your wife, it used to not be a crime. If you hit your neighbor or stole his horse, that was a crime. Now we're saying it's a crime to hurt your wife and or your spouse or your children.
Thank
It's
God
against
we
the
made
law.
it. Thank God we made it out of the '80s alive.
Well,
I,
and again, a lot of this has changed because a
yeah,
lot of men are been raised. They did a study in Germany. I think I mentioned this before. They did a recent study in Germany that said that between 25 and between a quarter and a third of percent. So let's just say one third of all men between the ages of 18 and 35 thought that it was okay to physically abuse your spouse or your girlfriend in Germany. I'm not pointing fingers at Germany. I'm looking at a population that they actually did a research study on.
right.
So one quarter to one third of all men believed, again, this is a belief system, they've been raised this way, believed it was okay to physically abuse your spouse if you wanted them to respect you. Power and control.
Did we
Isn't
ever?
that interesting?
It is, but did we ever do any study like that in the U.S.?
No, I mean, again, Germany is this big. The United States is this big.
Well, yeah, I listen. They do studies all the time. I'm
Yeah.
just wondering, and I'm not to take any importance away from what you said, but there's a there's a big difference between being raised in Germany and being raised in the United States, and I, and I see the potential growth on both sides from
Mm-hmm.
that study because at least
Well,
go ahead.
my question is, was it down from 50% and they've made a huge improvement?
Yeah, well, that would be the
Right?
question. That would
Right? Because,
honestly
I mean,
be
here's a
that
whole
would be the
country.
question.
Yeah,
I and,
that's the
and
question. Is it down or is it up? I don't know. But the truth of the matter is, a third of the men in Germany between the ages of 18 and 35, we're not talking about older men,
no, but that was
18 and
the older men were
35.
influencing the younger guys. Sorry,
Yeah,
they were influencing big time because action speaks louder than words.
right.
Um, and
So,
if you're doing it, and that I think that's probably a number that can be supported here. If you come from an abused family, you probably might be an abuser at some point.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
if you're
Because
watching that,
it's been modeled for you. This is the way you,
right?
this is how you control. This is respect.
Correct.
So whenever men or women, but primarily it's men, feel that they have power over another, and they will create circles of this. So I'm, there this book about recovering from rape talks about the fact that there are gang rapes, and raping a woman or raping your wife or doing a gang rape where you have multiple men that are doing it, it's part of bonding. It's a ritual. There was a time in the 90s where that came out that fraternities were ritually sending one of the fraternity members out to find a woman and then they would gang rape her. So ritual rape is a form of bonding between men.
Well, I think that was coming out. Um, I want to say in the '90s that was hitting
Yeah,
the airwaves because
yeah.
I'm trying to remember back when that was because I do
1990
remember
to
some
93.
colleges that were having courts over that,
Yeah,
and
because
it was
rape,
fraternity.
right? So we're still having this where, and homeless women right now are extremely vulnerable. And again, I'm just recently saw this where uh, somebody was drugged. I mean, she was a homeless woman. She's got a job. She has a car, but she can't find housing. There's no place to live. She broke up with her boyfriend. She got kicked out. She's out on the street. She's trying to find a place to live. Where does she go to the bathroom, right? I mean, where does she sleep that's safe? Well, somebody gave her a drink. They drugged the drink, which is very easy to do.
Yep.
Water, doesn't look like anything, or Coke, and they gang raped her. Homeless woman. And then we go, oh, well, she's just homeless. Well, she's a woman. She's a human being.
Yemen. Yep.
Nobody has the right. It's a crime. Gang rape is a crime, but people do it when and when they do it together, they create a bond with each other. So there's a common crime in that common bond.
Yep.
Interesting how that plays out.
You know, it's almost I can think about 10 movies recently that I've watched that have some sort of correlation in there with all of that. And as a kid, I'm going to date myself big time, but you know, I used to watch Rocky and Xanadu, and none of those were this. You know, I think the worst I watched when I was a kid that I watched over and over and over again was Rambo. And the one thing that didn't happen there was violence against the women in his movies. Um, that was violent. It was definitely violent, but there goes your light again. The lights went out
I
in Georgia.
know it. I have no control over it either.
You're
It's
you're you're
automated.
you're in the dark.
I'm in the dark.
Well, listen, it is
So just to
4:16.
comment on that too,
Sure.
just because, I'm sure you remember, I'm trying to get myself some light here.
Let there
Does
be
that
light.
help? Nope, that doesn't help either.
It helps you.
There you go.
That's
So
good.
the other thing, that there was a guy that did a huge amount of research, a study, and I cannot remember his name. I have to look him up, but he did a huge study on, like, the idea of Clint Eastwood, all of those macho men. Remember, like the Italian mafia, Godfather, like the real man, the Marlboro
Yep.
man. These images of men as being independent and isolated and abusive, and they shot people because they had the right to shoot somebody because they thought they remember Clint Eastwood. I mean, who does not remember Clint Eastwood? All those Dirty Harry, right? Was it Dirty Harry
Yep.
movies, shows? This creating this image of male machoism. uh Not the Dirty Harry guy. He wasn't married, he was divorced, his wife wouldn't speak to him, he had no money, and he was very violent, and he didn't get along with his boss, but because he was so good, he got away with doing what he did. So this guy did this huge research study on how young men at the time, right, uh, were learning how to become men by watching these shows on where men were macho, independent. They weren't fathers, they weren't husbands, they weren't good husbands, they weren't good fathers, they were divorced, they were separated, they, were isolated and nobody liked them. That's what a man, true man was. And he tried to go out and talk to people about that. And I don't even know where he is right now, what his work is. I have to go back into my research to find out who he was. So we've created, through television, which was our social media growing up, right?
It was.
We showed on TV what family life was supposed to look like. We made Father's Knows Best look like the ideal family, but it wasn't.
Well,
That
and
was not
you
the
know,
ideal family for most women.
we
From
we
who's,
actually
for whom, right? Who was
we
it
actually
great for?
yeah. Well, and here's the other side of it is that we've as a society um, watched the deterioration of I think even Hollywood with Bill Cosby, who was portrayed as the perfect homebody, the perfect comedian, who ended up not so perfect after all, and the king of abuse at that
Yeah,
point. And you know therein lies the definition of what you were saying, which was all those people around him all those years and nobody said anything. Power. the power he had.
To silence.
Don't, and that's if you think about it with that, just step back and take it all in and realize what we're saying. One guy had that kind of power. The other guy in out in California, that had the walker, got I can't think of his name for the life of me. I see his face, but he was the director.
Oh, Epstein, not Epstein.
No,
Harvey
Weinstein. So we
Weinstein.
got Weinstein, Epstein, and Cosby.
Oh,
Take
hello.
those three guys, and even with Epstein, when that all went down, my wife looked at me and said, the truth is going to come out. And I said, the truth just got buried. And guess
Yeah,
what? The truth got buried. There
that's right.
that that 100% could have been a cleansing moment, and it was not. And because it was not, this domestic violence and this control and this power, it's at another level when you get into those scenarios. And it's the same thing with I go back to what a police officer said to me once. If somebody's going to try to rob you, they work all day and all night on figuring out the system you have. You work 15 minutes by calling somebody and having them come and fix your house. That other guy is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to try to figure out how to get in your house. You worked 15 minutes at it. Yeah, you got somebody else who did it, but they already broke in. They already got that down. It's the same, that power they have. They're trying to manipulate everything 24/7. They're just doing it, and they're good at it. That person that's on the inside who's trying to get out and trying to figure it out and trying to, they're lost.
Right.
They're not going to win. And that's why it takes them 9 times to get out, because you got to build up the bravery to get out.
Yes. Well, just what you just said a few seconds ago. Remember when we talked about gang rape? Okay, so that creates a common bond. Think about all of these stars that have done such things, raped, and all the people around them that knew that that was happening and turned a blind eye. They are now in a common bond that could be held accountable to what is happening, and they're choosing to remain silent out of their own protection, right? Because they could be held, because it's criminal. This is a crime, and you're an accessory to the crime if you're not reporting it or stopping it.
Right.
In many of those situations. Or what do they have on you that they can keep you silent?
I'm telling you, it's uglier and uglier every day that things like that pass, because the Weinstein case, I mean, where's it at? It's not on the news anymore.
Nope.
It's done. Epstein, Lord have mercy, the only one in the history who completed suicide and attempted twice within 2 weeks. That never happens. That's, and no cameras working, guys sleeping, all this.
Conveniently.
Oh my gosh. If you just start opening your eyes and realize that you're right, you can be on the lower end of the spectrum, make it $15 an hour, be just fine, and not have those stressors. But you can be rich and have all that power. People around Bill Cosby, they were making all kinds of money, and they shut up. They shut up because they wanted to continue to make the money.
Yes.
And they took the abuse. They took everything that man dished out. And truthfully, he didn't get anything like he deserved.
That is correct. In my opinion, that is correct.
So, well, listen,
but it happens all over. It happens at it happens at a corporate level. Domestic violence and sexual assault in the workplace. Women are threatened their jobs if they say anything. Well, and we laugh about it, right? We made movies about it, 9 to 5.
Yep. Well, look at
Right, Laura, I agree with you. Yes,
yeah,
we need a whole month on that one.
yeah. Well, we need uh, 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 yeah. Well, that could be a whole nother month. What color will we make that one?
Yeah, right.
So,
Well,
all right. Well,
all
listen, we've extended 25 minutes. So I've got a couple contracts I got to finish up. So I really appreciate you and spending time. You know, I love talking to you anyway.
I know I
We
like
go on
talking
and
to you
on
too.
about all kinds of stuff. So I appreciate it. Laura, thanks for being part of the show, and everybody out there, share this as much as you can. Let's get this information out there. And you know what? Take care of yourself is the big thing. And if you need some help along the way, feel free to call and get some help from C.A.R.E because they will help take care of you. So I appreciate your time, Joan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John, for letting us be on this show every month. I'm always excited about it.
That's awesome. Well, this is John Rawlings with WKDW Radio, Real Talk Radio. Join us on Friday for another special guest. Also, check out Songwriter Souls on Thursdays at 6:30, and also check out our second showing of Bobcat. Um, oh gosh, Bobcat Blitz. I'm tired now, but that's on Tuesday from 6 to 7 at Beef O'Brady's Live. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot and have a great day. Bye bye
Thank
now.
you.
You're very welcome.